So hello everyone. How are y'all doing? You having a good con? It's kind of great, isn't it? For a first-time con, this is really well organized.
I don't know if anyone else has said this today, so if they have, I'm sorry that I'm being cliche, but this is one of the nicest smelling cons I've been at. You guys know how to bathe.
That's a fair comment.
Yeah, it's great. Well, thank you for coming to Jessica and David Comedy.
We were talking earlier, we thought, well, we might have a few people show up. Maybe we'll get enough, we'll just bring up to the front and sit in a circle.
Yeah.
So
It's gotten a little bigger than that.
they got a little bigger than that, yeah.
Also, because we keep getting asked, if anyone records this, not that I'm saying you should record it, like, I don't want to be that egotistical, but if anyone does record it, please tweet it at me or something so that I can share it out, because that's, I guess, part of my job.
Yes.
So speaking about
Speaking
our
about
jobs,
your job, why don't you introduce yourself?
smooth transition. My name's Jessica Marizin. For anyone who I haven't like shoved my presence down your throat yet. I lead the community team at BioWare, which basically means my team is in charge of all of the events we go to. So I'm a bit biased in deciding where I'm like, I'm gonna go to GamerX, you guys can work on this other stuff. We do all the conventions. My team does all the social media. We do all of the forums and the moderation. And we do fan feedback, which we'll actually be talking about on a different panel tomorrow. And yeah, that's my job. I was actually having a conversation with someone today about invisible communities and how to represent those. And I was like, well, most people think that a community manager is just the person who is tweeting out photos. But, and probably in a lot of companies, that is exactly what they do. But for me, I don't see my role as that. I come from an academic background before I got my job at BioWare.
Anthropology.
Accidentally. I was in London writing on material and visual culture, things you can touch and things you can see. And I come from a research background. I come from academia, and I think that community is just a catch-all term, unfortunately. And so my team doesn't even really do community, which translates to marketing and PR. My team really is all about building the BioWare culture. And the most important thing to me is representing those people who otherwise wouldn't have a voice at the table, because those people are really important to us and to the developers, to not just, even though maybe, you know, the marketing team has their objectives for what kind of demographics they want to hit, that's not necessarily a one-to-one correlation at all to who my team is trying to reach. And I think that everyone is important, but it's really important to me personally, as someone who has done a lot with marginalized communities in my own work as an anthropologist and archaeologist, that it's important to come to these places and talk to fans and let them know not only are we listening, but we are listening to you. So that's me. Kawhi, and who are you?
My name's David Gator. I'm a writer / narrative designer at BioWare. I'm currently lead on the Dragon Age series. I've been working with BioWare since the days of Baldur's Gate 2, but Dragon Age was sort of my first big project to be lead on. I got to design a bit of the world, get to sort of shape the narrative arcs. I started with Dragon Age Origins, of course, Dragon Age 2, ended up becoming Dragon Age Inquisition. So that's my day job. By night, I blog stuff and tell idiots to shut up.
He thinks he's rude. He's not rude.
Well, I'm Canadian. Canadian rude is different from other country rudes.
That's fair. That's fair. Can you please tell everyone what you? Can you tell everyone what? I mean, don't like be explicit, but the tweet that you told me about in the taxi that was really hilarious.
Well, I wrote a blog for just recently in honor of GamerX, actually.
On his Tumblr, it's what? davidgator.tumblr.com?
Dgator.com.
Dgator.
Yeah.
Complicating it.
Anyway, I was talking about the gay agenda in video games, since we require agenda just to have gays in video games. And I tweet about it, and I actually don't get that much negative response to the stuff I write. Oddly, because when you hear about some people who like women talking about feminism in games and will just get viciously attacked. It's a weird sort of imbalance there. I don't actually get much. I do get a bit, and the stuff I get can be pretty rude. And this one guy tweeted at me. I think he's from Russia. It's not a surprise, I guess. Anyway, he just tweeted me. He said, "Gays in games, F the gays, F all of the gays, basically." And I just tweeted back at him. I said, "That's an admirable goal." Sounds like it could be really tiring. Anyway, yeah, that's me. I end up dealing with this a lot. BioWare started doing gay romances as far back. Well, we had a little bit in Knights of the Old Republic, but we didn't really sort of touch on it. We had one character, Juhani, that was a lesbian, but we didn't really feel we could discuss that per se, and we didn't do it explicitly until Jade Empire actually was the first. I wasn't actually on that project either. Yeah. I was talking with Luke Christensen. He's another writer with me on Dragon Age, and I said, "So how did that conversation occur? Do you remember?" And he was like, "We had to think really hard because he's old." He'll hear that.
Poor guy. He's gonna know.
He'll say it himself. And he said, "Oh, we just were talking about the romances, and I forget who even mentioned it. We should just do them for both romances. Can we do that?" And we're like, "Sure." And that was apparently the entire conversation. And I remember James Olin was the lead designer on Dragon Age Origins before he went down to work on the Old Republic. But when we started off, he sat down with me and he said, they did this on Jade Empire, and oddly enough, there was really only positive response. You had the few malcontents, but for every malcontent, we had at least an equal number of people who were like, "Yeah, that's awesome. Do more of that." And it was kind of unexpected because if you think back to when that happened, the society was just a little bit different than it is now. It's hard to believe it was that recent. But the fact that we did it and our assumptions about what the massive outcry would be just did not materialize. So he sat down with me and he said, "Would you like to do this in Dragon Age?" And I'm gay, and I've never had the chance to really work on something like that in my games. So I was like, it's weird because I just I'd always assumed that was just never going to happen, right? So when he gave me the opportunity, I was actually quite touched. I was like, yeah, I would really, really like to do that because for a lot of gay kids growing up, especially introverts, right? They don't have a lot of friends. Maybe they keep this part of themselves utterly secret. They feel isolated. For a lot of introverted kids, video games may be their only outlet, and maybe the only one that could possibly validate them at a point where they really need that kind of validation, and they can't talk to anybody. So I thought this is a great chance. Not that I think kids necessarily should be playing Dragon Age, but they're gonna. They're gonna.
Whatever.
They're gonna. And it doesn't necessarily just because somebody's below age they should be playing a mature title. It applies equally to people who are older as well. Not everybody's in a comfortable situation in their life where that isn't a big deal for them. And even if they are, comfortable and out, I think it's important for that part of our audience to feel acknowledged. They are part of our player base, and it's weird that it only seems to be now that this conversation is starting to sink in to the industry. But it feels really, really good as a developer to be at a point where we can talk about that in the team and not get eye rolls. That people take it seriously, and I mean, I think there's a element there where there's like, well, maybe there's an economic benefit to this as well, because these people are playing our games already, sure, but now it's sort of seen, they're visible, and it's like, okay, if there are gay players out there playing video games, maybe getting more of them to come play our games could be profitable. You know, well, it seems like duh, but the translating that into a company, you know, one that sort of spends a lot of money and thus is very risk averse. So anything that has any, you know, even smells of controversy or risk sort of makes them turn pale, right? So it's a very interesting conversation when suddenly there's an acknowledgement that this is something that they're not only willing to do, but we're going to jump in with both feet. So it's great to be part of that.
I also just want to mention that I just tweeted out the picture. So while David was...
Did you really?
Yeah, I did. You can retweet me if you'd like.
Okay. All right.
And all of you can find the picture. You can't tag yourself on Twitter, but you can retweet it. Yeah, I think that I also go to Geek Girl Con every year. I think it's really important to support small cons. And, you know, to be honest, you go to the big cons and you just start getting really overwhelmed and feeling kind of sucked into a sea of just faceless blobs. And it's really important to, I'm sorry, I feel apparently very strongly
Way to community
about,
manage.
I know, well, oh God, don't tweet that. But I think it's important to come to places like this because I don't think that people know how invigorating it is for not just a fan, but for a dev to go to a con. It's exhausting, but you go back and you feel ready to work at 200% or more. That getting to meet you guys is just as exciting, if not some more exciting, based on some of the stories, moving, touching, funny, some morbid, but I'm okay with that. That we take back and you know, we really put into our work. That it's not making games in a silo for ourselves.
Well, I think you sort of get a sense sometimes that if all you interact with is the fans that are online, you would get a very distorted picture of who's out there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we've all seen people on the internet, and it can get pretty ugly, and a lot of times the ones that have, you know, no life at all and can spend, the more time they can spend on their computer, the more of a voice they have, and they can sort of dominate the conversation. So you get this really strange picture, and they get a strange picture of their own, you know, you get these things like, well, everybody feels this way kind of thing, right? And it's like, I don't think that's true, because, you know, I go to cons and talk to regular people, and I don't think they're the aliens. So.
No. Okay, so last September, I put out a survey. I am not a sociologist, so it was not the, people are retweeting it and I'm getting push notifications. I'm going to put that away. I'm not a sociologist, so it was not the best worded survey. But did anyone take that survey? It was kind of about BioWare community. Thank you for taking that survey. So it was basically asking about BioWare community, about using our forums and our social media. And I can't tell you why we did that, but I can tell you that I manage the team who does all those things, but I didn't say what I actually do. A change is coming. The internet, as we know it, for BioWare, is not the cesspool that
Cesspool.
it currently is. And let's be,
Abattoir is more appropriate.
What?
Abattoir.
Of course, you would say, of course, yes, sure. Just what the writer said. But I want people to know that I see what you see when you go online. I see the vitriol, the hate, the just outright bigotry. And I want you to know that we are actively working on putting that to an end. That I
Not
wish
bigotry itself.
I mean, I don't want to, shoot for the moon or the sun or whatever.
We're talking about the
You'll
experience
land among
online,
the
right?
stars,
Yeah.
whatever.
The way people communicate.
But yes, no, I hear you. I see it, and because things take a lot of time to develop and get going, and to do it the right way, it seems like a long time. But for the one person who did take that survey, and the rest of you who are really unhappy with the state of things online, I want you to know that we're not ignoring that, and we hate it just as much, if not more, than you do. And
There's a lot of good stuff to find online, too.
yeah.
I mean, it's a way to get... when you're working as a developer, you sort of you exist in this vacuum, right? A little bit, where you can never really tell if what you're working on is the right thing to do, if it's going to have the effect that you hope for, or people are going to take it in an interesting way. You might be able to use focus testers to check it out, but focus testing can be a little bit odd sometimes. You ask somebody for criticism and they'll give it.
Yeah.
And you could do that repeatedly and the criticism would never end. As long as you keep asking for it, people will give it to you. And sometimes focus testers have this thing where they try to give you answers they think you want. It's a little strange sometimes. So you're constantly playing this kind of guessing game, and mostly at the end of the day, you can't go wrong if you just sort of look in your heart and do what you think works. And that can be a little bit hard too, because that limits you to maybe only putting something out there that speaks to you personally, and you have the audience is so large, right? I mean, the answer to that, of course, is getting some developers from different walks of life. We're fortunate. We have a lot of women on our team. My writing team is majority women, actually.
Yeah.
But that means having gay people. I mean, I'm one. I'm not the only one, but it means having different ethnicities. I mean, just to get past that the default, right? The assumption that every character you have before you say anything about it is automatically straight white male. Like, to get away from that, I mean, we've started doing things. I know our lead concept artist, Matt Rhodes, whenever he does our thumbnails, whenever he's doing thumbnails, he draws out cutscenes, sort of how they're going to work before we actually implement them. He uses the female main character just sort of to get over well, of course he would do a male. No, do female. Why not? It's just concept art. It's changing the way we think.
Even internally.
Changing internally the way we think. When I write documentation, half the time I will use she as the sort of default pronoun. Why not? It's just getting rid of the assumption that that we have to start with straight white male, and you have to actively justify it in order to be anything else. Because I think that's boring, and I think that that's something more of the industry needs to sort of a mindset that we need to encourage, and you can only encourage it by having conversation. You can only encourage it by having events like this that make that sort of spread that knowledge that there's this audience out there that it isn't that hard to ignore. I mean, I guess that's true. It isn't that hard to ignore, but it isn't that hard to please either.
Yeah.
If you have a character, is it really too much to ask that having even incidental characters that could maybe have a different appearance or different ethnicity, if we can? And sometimes it feels like the answer comes back and it's like, yeah, it is that hard. Is it? It's a weird barrier to try to get around. Thankfully, I mean, if we're talking about BioWare, this is Meet BioWare, not BioWare people just pontificate.
Is there a difference?
Well, I mean, to talk about BioWare itself, the atmosphere at BioWare is really great. I mean,
yeah, I always get a little bit. Labels are an important way for us to define ourselves and to talk meaningfully about other people. I think it's important that we not only have a lot of diversity within BioWare and lots of different, we don't have, the gay perspective that, everyone has their own perspective. But we also have a lot of straight white males who are really good advocates for us. I think that there's the tendency for straight white males who are allies to just feel like, oh, well, I'm a middle-class white guy. I can't even talk. I can't even bring myself into the conversation. And it's important to have all of those voices, that we're all here sitting at the table, that we make sure we leave a seat open for everyone. And I think that has led to some people being able to fight on behalf of, maybe a dev who hasn't come out yet.
I don't it even requires a fight necessarily, but just being open-minded, and that's sort of where the conversation starts, rather than having to convince people to get open-minded. It's changing. I mean, not that BioWare does everything perfect. I mean, it's a big company, right? There's lots of different viewpoints, and the message doesn't always trickle down to every part of the company, but it's changing, and it's a really great time to be in the company. I think.
No, it's there's a lot of really exciting things going on. I am, one of my pet things that I talk about all the time. I talk about how sexuality is separate from sex, with biological sex, which is separate from gender, which is fluid, and it also changes over time in terms of notions. And I was freaking out about it on Twitter, which is pretty normal for me. And I came into work the next day, and I happened to be visiting BioWare Edmonton. And for myself, I don't put a lot of labels on myself. Most of the things that I consider like part of my identity are not even things that I talk about. I wouldn't even necessarily consider myself like straight. I mean, I think ladies are pretty attractive. I like boobs, whatever. But I am married. It's not, But I was freaking out about it on Twitter, and one of my team members was like, I feel the same way, but I really haven't felt like I could talk about that. And so sometimes it's that person being able to go to bat for someone else who's just not there yet, who can't articulate themselves, or who hasn't even come to terms with it. And I think that that's the really cool thing that I've heard from a lot of fans about BioWare games, is that not even just the devs, but the actual game helped them come to terms with who they are. And I think that that's one of the proudest things that I have to say about even being tangentially part of that.
Yeah. Do we want to talk about what happened, like how BioWare works? Do we have time for that?
Yeah, I mean, I want to leave time for questions. Yeah, we've got a few minutes, and then we should open up for questions.
Because I imagine there's some people who wonder, like, well, how does a game get made? I mean, you look at our BioWare Edmonton office. I think we have about 500 people there, 400, 500,
like
something
400.
like that. There's two different teams, of course, right? There's the team that made Mass Effect. They're currently moving on to something else. And then there's the Dragon Age team. And so we have a lot of people who shuffle between the teams, depending on whichever one is sort of, we call it priority zero, right? The next game that's coming down the line, everyone panics and sort of this mob jumps on it, and we try to sort of beat it into something that resembles a game. But basically, we spend a lot of time, first, we're in concept, where you have a core team, probably a much smaller team, where we talk about, like, what is this game going to be about? We're doing a lot of spitballing, brainstorming. That's where a lot of the main, the foundations of the game get nailed down. That's where, if I'm right, that's where I would come in as the narrative designer and looking at the arc of the game. And it takes a lot of back and forth. Like some people imagine that writing for games is sort of like writing a novel, that the writers would go in an office, write out this huge script, and then go to the rest of the team and say, here you go. And it doesn't work like that. It's a collaborative effort. There's the people up top that sort of they decide like the bullet points, right, that go on the box. What kind of game do they want? They would tell me what kind of tone. I want a grim, dark game with lots of blood. Okay. And eventually we would sort of start with here's a sort of one-page document of like, okay, the stuff you told me, it's all in here, and a few ideas of my own, and what do you think? And we'll go back and forth on that, and then we'll just start building on that once everybody's sort of in agreement and building a consensus, right? Because there's going to be things, storytelling isn't only for writers. Storytelling, like at a place like BioWare, people come to work for BioWare, whether they're a programmer or a character artist, a level artist, someone who works on cinematics. They all came to BioWare because they wanted to take part in storytelling. It doesn't get reserved for writers. You can tell a story through a level. Have you ever play BioShock? BioShock, one thing that is it Irrational? Mm-hmm. The one thing Ken Levine and company do really well is they tell a lot of story through their levels. You can walk into a room and you can look around, and there's a narrative in the level without any dialogue or characters there to necessarily tell you anything. So there's a lot of consideration that can go into things that aren't necessarily being told through words. So these people have come to BioWare because they want to be storytellers. So it would be really selfish for the writers to go off and just decide on our own what kind of story this is going to be. So we can sit down with a level artist and he can say, what I've always wanted to tell this. I want to do this level where it's for a while we were going to do. I don't know if you guys remember Dragon Age 2 had the big statue out in front of the harbor with the chain that goes across.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and we were planning to do a level for a little while where you'd be running across that chain and fighting on the chain, and it was sort of a neat kind of element. Why didn't that happen? Because it got canceled.
Sometimes, guys, you don't want to know how the sausage is made.
Yeah. That was the expansion, actually. But yeah. So if he's really excited about that, and then the writers can hear that and go, oh yeah, that opens up some interesting possibilities for us to tell a story, right? The actual core of the story can start in multiple places. Matt Rhodes, our lead concept artist, did an excellent blog recently where he talked about the process of moving from the beginning of character concepts, and we go through lots of iterations trying to figure out how to tell a story. He was telling how we wanted to change the look of the Darkspawn between Origins and Dragon Age 2, and sort of why we did it, and some of the iterations of that, and the thinking behind it, right? There's a lot that goes into it, because the character artist will come to me. We will do a sketch for a character. We just sort of do a brief description, and then the character artist comes back, and they've put these little details, little things that tell a story about that character. Like, well, they have this pouch, and there's this thing you can see in the pouch, and that says we sort of incorporated this part of the story you wrote, and you can see it on them, and it's like, oh, actually, I didn't mean that at all, but that's really awesome. So I could sort of jump on that, right? So even mistakes sometimes can.
And cosplayers can use it for their cell phones.
Yeah. Unless they Yes.
No, Matt. Actually, that's just as a funny aside. Our art director, Matt Goldman. Anytime they show him a concept, after he went to some cons, he's like, "All right, put a cell phone pocket on, and it's perfect."
Yeah. I mean, if you can incorporate it, sure. I think he sometimes puts things in just to screw with the cosplayers, though. Like they'll never be able to make that stay on. It's true.
We try. We try.
Super glue.
But no, I think that's a really important thing. I got accosted on the street by one of those people who wants you to sign up for one of those charity things, and so I signed up, and now I sponsor a little girl in Tibet, and I write her letters sometimes, and she sends me pictures of her hands, and she asked me what I do for a job, and she traces her hands. She doesn't take photos of her anyway. She asked me what I do, and it was I had to sit there for a long time because she's 6 and she lives in Tibet, which is entirely, totally. And
it's hard to tell. It's hard to explain what you do at BioWare to people who speak English.
Yeah, but I think what I came down to is I said, well, I'm a storyteller. I work at a place where we tell stories. We tell the stories of people.
I mean, even after the fact, I mean, you're in community, the helping change or helping create the perception of our stories is part of the story as well. It doesn't stop once it goes out the door. Authorial intent only goes so far, right? So Jessica and her team sort of help create the framework that everybody experiences the story, the way they view it, right? It's part of the narrative.
Yeah, because perception is everything.
Yeah.
So
I think we're
yeah, I was gonna say. So I think
like
that's
maybe
yeah,
we got enough time for questions.
Yeah, let's have some questions.
Yeah, I think there's a
we have a
microphone.
runner somewhere who's
Yep.
okay. Oh my God, I'm so nervous.
Hi.
Hello.
Hey there.
So obviously I was a big fan of Dragon Age, and definitely the romances in that were amazing. But
What?
is it? What was the discussion as to why to make Alistair straight? And was there a discussion?
Also, quick plug. We have a panel tomorrow at 4 p.m. about romances. So
You know, it's funny because that was still sort of at the beginning of when we were even thinking about doing this. It wasn't let's make Alistair straight, but I sort of Alistair and Morgan had already been created, and then we were looking at making more characters and which among them would be romanceable by either gender. Although I think Zevran initially I'd concepted him as gay, based on some reading I was doing on the CIA supposedly recruiting assassins who were homosexual because they tended to have less family connections, and I don't know.
wow.
I know, right? But this was back in the 50s anyway, and that's so.
Okay,
It made me
okay.
think about what kind of person, you know, that's sort of the thinking that led to Zevran, and I thought, oh, that might be a really interesting way to interact with somebody on a romantic level. So I wasn't trying to exclude Alistair necessarily. I just thought that the Zevran would be an interesting thing for me to write about. And it wasn't until we got to DA2 where we sort of were like, well, what if we made everyone available to both genders? Like, would that be a really terrible thing? Some people seem to think so. I mean, it's a really kind of it's a sad thing to say. There's a lot of I think I'd almost call it like outright bigotry against the idea of bisexuality, even though these characters aren't necessarily bisexual. But there's a large portion of the player base just sort of has this weird kind of reaction when they discover that in some other game that character could romance somebody of the other gender. So they start doing things like, so they're really indecisive? So they're slutty? So I bet you some of you have heard this stuff, right? And it's really kind of disturbing to hear some of the talk. So like, people, don't like the idea of their supposedly straight romance sort of being sort of touched by homosexuality, even in some other play. So it wasn't until Dragon Age 2 that we sort of even ventured into the idea, well, what if all the romances were available to both genders? I mean, would that be a lot of extra work? And it just, then that would mean that gay players would have just as many choices as the straight players. That seems fair. I mean, I think that if I'm playing a game, I would like a choice of romances just like everybody else. So, and it seemed weird that would have to be a thing that you'd have to suddenly, hey, what a new idea. It just it kind of felt that way a little bit. Yeah. So I wasn't trying to keep you from Alistair, I swear.
Alistair literally breaks everyone's heart.
Yeah. I really just wanted to inflict him on the women. Because Alistair never loved you, it's true.
No, he did. I saved a tweet where you said he did.
Yeah. Okay, it's true, but I was just being nice.
Just me.
You have another question?
Hi. I just want to start off, I'm just a huge fan. Like, I grew up playing Baldur's Gate 2.
Oh, awesome.
And, like, Aerie is one of my favorite characters of all time, and then Alistair's, like, the boyfriend I'll never have, so.
Wow.
So, I'm sorry, but where do you draw your inspiration from for your character? It's just like, for you personally, do you like go circle time with like Cheryl and Jen and just all talk
Yeah.
about this?
For each writer, it's a little bit different. I mean, I remember when I wrote Morrigan, the very initial inspiration for Morrigan was Delirium from the Sandmen. I know you wouldn't see that now. You'd be like, really? There was a first version of Morrigan where she talked sort of, airy, kind of dreamy, a little bit more like Flemeth, because Flemeth sort of talks in circles, right? That was initially a version of Morgan I wrote, and I just thought, I can understand anything she's saying. So I just thought, I'll do that over, and it was like, well, what do I do with her now? Maybe if I dig really, really deep, I could write something bitchy. Really deep, no, not
Super
that
deep.
Super deep. And that was really fun. So I mean, it just sort of, it was just sort of trying to find something for each character. I know that if I talk to like Jen or Cheryl or Mary, they have a different spark. I mean, like looking at when Mary wrote Varric. Varric's a great character he turned out, didn't he? He played Dragon Age 2. And I mean, it would be weird if you heard that initially he was supposed to be kind of like a sleazy car salesman guy. Look at the concept art initially was like he had the bare chest and
He
had like the
did.
gold chains and.
I have to say candidly, the Inquisition trailer, that was the first time I was like, crap, he's handsome. I like still kind of had the like original concept like sleazy guy, and so now I went back and played 2, and I was like, damn, he is attractive.
And then Brian Bloom has the voice.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was sort of that's where he started off. And then Mary kind of at some point she just had sort of this spark of I don't know, like she talked to me about it once, but I couldn't understand what the hell she was saying. But at some point she sort of wrapped her mind around the fact that this car salesman dude could have a heart of gold, right? And that if he just had your back, that could make him like of all the characters we have in DA2, maybe it would be good for that to have one friend, one real friend. And then it was like, oh, that's a really good thing. Why don't you try running with that? And it just sort of grew out of there. So it's kind of hard sometimes when you're writing to know where your inspiration actually came from. It's just every character you write is part of you to a degree. Alistair is part of me, Morgan, but also Shale. And those might seem like really different characters, but yeah, there's an element of me that sort of where they grow out of it. And I can't explain it better than that. It's just that you dig into your experience a little bit and you get a kernel, and the rest of it just comes. Hi.
Hi. So I've been to a couple of panels today, and I was here earlier for the other panel that you guys did.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's come up or come across is ways to push that sort of interaction or that boundary of LGBTQ characters in games. And one of the things that was pointed out in another panel is that to make it mainstream, as in not a question to make it socially acceptable, you may need to pull something like the whole Samus Aran thing, right? The switch at the end of Metroid.
Yeah.
Now,
I don't know if I would like the idea of tricking people like that, though, you know?
I don't know. I think
It might work, but
From the perspective of needing to establish the attachment to the character before you get into the question of gender
Sure.
or sexuality.
Sure.
My question for you guys is, do you feel like you're doing a disservice, or are you planning to change the process in the future where you give people the option to opt out of those sort of relationships or those questions of identity or anything in the games?
You mean a gay toggle?
Right.
You know, there was somebody, there's a rather famous post on our forums where the guy was sort of ranting about the fact that we didn't pay enough attention to the straight male gamers. I know. It just, I could see where he was coming from. It's like, because from his perspective, he wasn't really interested in equality, right? Equality meant that he got less, whereas because previously they got everything, so he's getting less, and he didn't like that idea. He didn't like the fact that much attention was being paid to other people when it could be going to him. So it was a little strange. And one of the things he brought up was a gay toggle. He said, I don't like having this stuff thrown in my face. I should be able to just turn it off. and not have to encounter something like Anders in Dragon Age 2, who, if you were nice to him, would make a pass at you. And you could say, no thanks, and then he would never bring it up again. And that apparently was beyond the fucking pale. So, my response to that was just, it's a mature game. We have a lot of things that go on in that game. Mass murder, slavery, lots of issues that you don't get to turn off.
No, I wish my mom hadn't gotten in Dragon Age 2, but
So,
can't turn everything off that is distasteful to you.
Yeah, exactly. So, I would want to include stuff that is, if I was to say what I would like to do, I think you should be able to encounter gay characters and gay themes, even if you yourself are not interested in the gay romance. The gay romance part, I think, should always be optional. It'd be something that people should elect to
deal with
in our games.
In our
anyway.
games.
I mean, I don't know what other people are going to do, but just because that's if we are intimating that we want you to have a connection to your character, to your avatar, that the choices you make should reflect what you want, right? I mean, but there are options that I don't think you necessarily need to give. Like some people say, well, why didn't I get to stab Anders in the face?
Because you didn't write the game.
Yeah. I think the right response there is, thank you, but no.
And we'll talk about that more tomorrow at our panel at 1 p.m. in here.
Yes. I think we have more time for more questions.
We have 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Run! Right to the front. All right.
Hey, thank you.
Hi.
So, hi. What I was really interested is what kind of discussions you have for these, alien or non-human species in terms of sexuality. So, for example, you had Garrus, and everyone liked Garrus from Mass Effect, yeah. But it was kind of, decided that he was straight, and that was kind of how it went. But you have other races in Mass Effect that are all female or all, there's I haven't seen an all male yet, so I'm hoping. But how do you have these discussions about gender in alien species or gender in non-alien species, and how do you address sexuality in those kind of things?
Well,
do you have anything on that?
Yeah, I think historically with Mass Effect 1, there was this idea that the only character you could romance that was an alien was Liara, because there was an aspect of, and not to say that you're wrong, but to say all female it's non-gendered pretty much. It's, she has boobs, we call her she, because that's how we understand, but it's more complex than all male, all female, but that was the most human of the aliens, and the developers at the time thought that would be the least
That was as far as we could
jarring thing. But then the response after the game was a lot of feedback wanting to romance the aliens, and that's where we got into the Garrus and the Tali and the Thane, and writing these characters again, not necessarily as alien, but as just these great rich characters. That it had nothing to do with this kind of like tentacle monster fetish to romance an alien. It had to do with the fact that whatever, that's okay too. That beyond what that character looked like, that people were attracted to that and wanted access to further that with a romance. And so I think after that point, it became less. No, I won't shut up. It became less about what that character looked like and more the substance behind the character.
So if you think about what like Garrus with the mandibles,
This claw hammer.
you don't want to think too much about that, but I mean, she's right. And I think that at some point we were like, that's probably not that important to people, actually.
Yeah.
Another question? Oh, where is it coming from?
So I just had a question. What you were describing earlier about how some of the response from straight men were like, well, I don't even want to be in a scenario where I'm being approached and so on. That sounds very familiar. That sounds like a real world kind of scenario.
Yeah.
So I'm curious how much of this, as a creator and somebody who's working in fiction, you're still confronting things that are actually very real. And so, I mean, do you guys feel that you're sort of taking on a pretty heavy load, tackling some of this, or are some of the tactics that you're using when you design these scenarios reflecting that awareness, or?
I think we're trying to wonder exactly how much credit we should give it, because I mean, to say that all straight men would feel threatened by that would be a real disservice. We get a lot of straight men who self-identify on our forums and elsewhere who say, you know what, I'm straight, and I'm glad that other people get a chance to enjoy the game the same way I do.
Yeah.
And I mean, so I don't think we should design the game assuming that straight men are all selfish idiots, right? It's not true. It's
No.
not true. There is a segment, sure, but so you're trying to decide, well, how much do you want to design it with that assumption in mind? Because that's kind of it's a bit unfair. So at some point, I guess the design we get to a point we try to accommodate them a little bit. We're not trying to scare them or anything, right? And at some point there does come a time in the design where you say, all right, well, we'll give them this much allowance, and once they get there, they're just gonna have to suck it up, because we're.
And to be very clear, this is a very small minority.
Yeah,
of
it's
our
a small
players.
minority, but I mean, if the worst thing that could happen to them is that Anders could make a pass at them, well, too fucking bad, really. I don't think it's that much to ask.
Yeah. So unfortunately, that's all the time we have.
Is that we done?
Yep, we're done.
We don't have time for one more question?
No, we don't. But if you do still have a question, I get really nervous about hanging out after panels and getting pushed away. So David and I are going to hang out there.
Out there?
Out there, over in that not so crowded corridor.
Yeah.
So if we didn't get to answer your question, please hang out over there. We will be back here tomorrow at 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. And David has a signing at 3 p.m. in the King Cat room or something.
Prince of
Cats. So sure. So thank you guys so much for coming out. I hope you'll ask us a question. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks for coming.